I contacted Jacoby and MaRS and the guys in the States, because there was a guy in Philadelphia, a guy in Ohio, and we had one hell of a get-together in Las Vegas. So if you can imagine, it was 8 sort of shit-kicking lawyers and myself. We had a hell of a time, and I decided to start it in Toronto. And I remember the most difficult thing that in my startup was the decision to hire a full-time secretary, because in those days I think she wanted $25,000 or $30,000, and it was a real commitment to hire her and then to try to figure out how to pay her salary. And everything was sort of downhill after that. So at the time I wanted to start the storefront, there was a law, the Law Society refused to allow advertising, and lawyers did not advertise price, and they didn't quote prices. In fact, it was rude of the consumer to ask the price up front. So knowing I'd have trouble putting a price list in the window of the retail location, which is what I planned to do, I wrote to the Law Society and asked them if I could place a price list in my reception area, and they wrote back and said yes. So they unfortunately couldn't then resile from that opinion that they'd given me, so I got a very large price list and put it in my reception area looking out to the street. And it worked very well. Lawyers were incensed. The media was extremely happy. I got amazing coverage. And consumers, I can't describe the flood of business I had in my first few years of operation. It was just unreal. We literally had lineups like Tim Hortons has outside on the sidewalk. Anyway, I mean, I've increased my business modestly to 8 locations in the GTA. It's still a very small business. One thing I'd mention is that I have looked at other things in the legal business over the years, because I think in business, your business changes all the time, and your products and services have to improve continually. You can't just stay in a static position. So I've looked at prepaid legal, insurance. I've looked at online legal forms, and I have offered online legal forms, and I've had customers in the US and the UK and that sort of thing. And I still don't understand why lawyers and accountants, now I appreciate their professional rules, but why they don't operate in a side-by-side basis. So one of the things I've always looked for is an accounting firm to operate in the store next to me in the retail setting. Because obviously a small business person comes in, they get legal and accounting one stop, which is a desirable thing. Because you need the legal, you need the accounting, so that when you do make money, or if you don't make money, you know about it. But I guess really in summary, the main thing is the importance of change. And it concerns me that our culture at the moment in Canada, while it's maybe improving a little bit, is not a risk-taking culture. And I think, unfortunately, the average person doesn't realize that you risk absolutely nothing by going into business. You don't need capital. You don't need money. You don't need anything. You need an idea, and you do need an idea that will generate more revenue than expenses. But it's just like running a lemonade stand. You sell it for more than it costs you to make. Thank you.
Well, Jane is, I think, one of the keys to startups, and that is to go against conventional wisdom. I think you'll find in each of your ideas, to be successful, you have to go against conventional wisdom, and there's nobody that's gone against conventional wisdom than Jane. She's done a fabulous job. She's gone against my own profession. And by the way, I started 37 startups while I was practicing law at Minden and Gross. They allowed me to do this, and all but 2 or 3 of them are surviving in many parts of the world. But again, each idea, when I look back and I listen to Jane, was all based on conventional wisdom. Everybody said it couldn't be done. And as soon as somebody said that to me, because I was a contrarian, I decided that was a challenge. Our next speaker is Stuart MacDonald, who's had a fabulous career right here in Toronto. Stuart is an independent business advisor and investor with a focus on online and web-enabling businesses. You should look at his bio because it's quite extraordinary. He's really a Renaissance man. His clients and investee companies range from online through Canada's largest media and telecommunications organization. He's co-founded Canada's Web Conference, which happening here in Toronto, and he also produces marketing content, conducts keynote interviews and moderate panels. He's a guy that thinks up the idea, executes the idea, and sells the idea. He's an incredible guy, and he's put together a group called the Mesh Group. You'll hear much more about this. They produce mesh marketing with a focus on digital marketing and social media, and Mesh U, which provides a master class for digital business and media operators. He's a co-founder of Tripharbour Limited, an operator of Tripharbour.ca, Tripharbour.com, the web's first online cruise vacation e-commerce community with a head office in Toronto and a development team in Vancouver. And prior to this, he was a founder of a code that you'll all recall, or an icon you'll all recall or know, Expedia.ca. I won't go on and on about his many talents other than to say to you he's an extraordinary Canadian and he's an extraordinary businessman. And we're just delighted to come and have him tell his story. Stuart.
Thanks. No? Great. Okay, good. So quick show of hands before we get going. Put your hands up if you've ever purchased travel online. Put your hand up if you haven't purchased travel online. Okay, so that's about 3 out of however many hundred people. Okay, hands up if you've ever purchased your wife does, good. Hands up if you've ever purchased a cruise vacation Remember that. There's one. Thank you. Great. I'm going to take everybody back to 1993, which is sort of a long, long time ago. I don't know for some of you that are here that you're necessarily going to remember this, but the company that I worked for at the time, I was the first guy that had really what they called a portable computer back in those days. Do you remember those compact computers with the orange plasma screens that sort of pulled up out of them and the keyboard that tilted down, and it weighed about 50 pounds and it had a handle on the top of it, and it was totally bleeding edge, right? So I'm like this young whippersnapper at the company I was working for at the time. I had one of those. 1993, I'm at home. Plug the thing in, and I'm using what was called a bulletin board. Okay, and a bulletin board was this sort of thing that you dialed into using a dial-up modem. You connected to this thing, and you could look at stuff that would come up sort of one character at a time on your screen at like 2,800 baud, and you could do stuff like maybe you could get through and read what somebody was saying about this and that, or anyway, it was cool. Hey, this was not the web. Right? The web was just sort of coming around. But this was the ability to connect electronically to others using this thing. Well, I went onto this bulletin board thing, and through some weird turn of events, and I was not in the travel business, I was not in the technology business, none of this, but I was traveling a hell of a lot for my work at the time. I ended up on this thing called Easy Sabre. And Sabre is a big computer reservation system. They own Travelocity. Travelocity was their plan B, and that's how it worked out. But Easy Sabre basically was this thing where you could go and you could put in like YYZ space DFW space 12/ and get like flight times and prices and stuff, and they would come in one character at a time at 2,800 baud across the screen, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to change the world. Honestly. Fast forward, the end of that decade, I had moved into the travel industry. I had been in corporate travel. I had been in leisure travel. And I was about 6 months into a project to take a big Canadian tour operator online and sell their product online and direct to consumer, which was huge in a bunch of ways. First, it was huge because selling stuff travel online. It still really wasn't being done at that point. Secondly, I got the board because, as is the case with most Canadian travel companies, they're all owned overseas for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. These guys are owned in the UK. The folks in the UK had said, here's $1 million, go and get this thing done. I was about 6 months into that. I get a phone call from Redmond, Washington saying, hey, we've heard of you. We like the cut of your jib. Why don't you come talk to us? We've got this thing. We've got this unit called Microsoft Travel Technologies, and we're really interested in you coming to work with us and bringing this thing into Canada. And the consumer name for it is MSN Expedia. And Microsoft Travel Technologies was this unit that basically did private label computer software development for people like Continental Airlines, US Airways. So you go to their websites, and it was basically Microsoft Travel Technologies behind the scenes. At some point, somebody said, hey, wait a second. This could be a consumer service on its own, and we could use this web thing, and we could sort of like build it out like that, and then we could distribute it, and people could come and they could buy stuff on it. Wouldn't that be interesting? So I get the gig to basically bring Expedia to Canada. At that time, Expedia, Microsoft Travel Technologies has then become Expedia. Expedia worldwide was about 185 people. I was the 185th. I got the gig to start Expedia in Canada. I go down to Seattle for my first week of sort of learning who these people are and what I need to do, and I'm informed to basically like, hey, listen, great that you're here. Really, really pleased to have you on board. Just so you know, the first thing you have to do is come up with a business plan that says why the hell we need you. So I had quit my job, had a newborn in the house, my wife was on mat leave, and my first job is to create a business plan to indicate what the heck I was ever going to do and why Canada mattered and what was ever going to happen with this thing anyway. So, interesting. You all put your hands up, and virtually everybody in this room put your hands up. Back in those days, I would go to the proverbial cocktail party, and I mean this literally, and people would say, so what are you doing now? It's like, oh, well, you know, we're doing this online travel thing, and it's really, really cool, and I'm sort of working on the plan, and people looked at me like I had 15 heads. They're like, so what's that? So is it you're selling books about travel, is it? Or is it like something to do with maps maybe? No, what you're going to do is you're going to go there and you're going to say, I'm looking for a hotel in Las Vegas, and you put your credit. You're insane. Who is ever going to do that? You're wacky. I'm afraid of my credit card, and my travel agent can do that for me, and everything is just fine. You're out of your mind. You're completely and totally insane. And I was told this by friends. I was told this by former coworkers. And then sort of the great sages of the industry. I'd go to the travel industry events or whatever, and the great sages of the industry sitting around tables, all sort of looking there and saying there is absolutely nothing happening online. There is nothing happening online. It is, maybe in the States, maybe in Europe, but there's not. And I'd sit there and I'd sort of twiddle my thumbs as the great sages of the industry talked about this thing that was simply never going to happen. In the meantime, I'm chugging through like $200 million in sales. I sat there writing this business plan alone in my house in Bloor West Village in the west end of the city. I had a laptop computer on top of an old Singer sewing machine with the pedal underneath, so I couldn't actually put my feet under the thing, but we didn't have any other table, and I didn't want to sit in the dining room. So I sat there, and I opened the thing up, and I worked on this business plan, and at like 8 or 8:30 at night, my little, remember those prehistoric cell phones? It would ring. It'd be my wife calling from the living room saying, when am I coming home? And I was sort of out around the corner, and so 8:30, I'd go back in. Got the business plan approved, and we started to grow the Canadian business. So first I hired one guy, hired a site producer, then I hired a marketing guy, then I hired an analyst, then I hired a supplier relations person, and so in fairly short order, we were 4 or 5 people basically committed to trying to build this business out. When I sat there alone by myself in the house on those slides, I was saying things like we would do $300 million in sales after 2 years. I'm sitting alone in my house with a bunch of people telling me that this idea is insane. And I'm writing a business plan that says inside 2 years, I'm going to be doing hundreds of millions of dollars in sales.